Be rational in your thinking. When I came in to discuss a loan, Kevin, the bank officer, smiled smugly and stated, "We don't lend money to bottom-tier farmers." It was obvious that there was no use in continuing to argue with this individual. I let out a deep breath and shared my thoughts with him. "Fine then, I'll stop renting out my land to you." Kevin's mouth fell open, and then he started laughing. "A bank renting land from a poor individual like you. Are you even able to hear yourself?" Kevin burst out laughing. He had no idea, though, that in a few minutes he would be pale and shaking. "Nathan is my name. I am 51 years old, and I work in my hometown as a farmer. I used to work for a popular restaurant chain in the city when I was younger. However, I quit my work and went back home when my grandparents' health deteriorated. I've been cultivating veggies on my grandparents' farm for more than 20 years, doing everything at my own speed. Why I, the grandson, received my grandparents' land instead of my parents' may be a mystery to some. The explanation is straightforward. I have no parents. My parents and I used to reside in a different prefecture, but my father vanished when I was in elementary school. He simply disappeared without saying anything. We were struggling financially with just my mother remaining, so she turned to her parents, my grandparents, for help. Following that, my mother left to work, and my grandparents, who were also farmers, reared me. But when I was 10, disaster would strike this tranquil life once more. I was informed that a traffic accident had claimed the life of my mother, who worked in the city. My grandparents officially took me in after that, and the three of us shared a home. I asked if I might assist with the farm work since, even as a child, I felt bad about relying on my grandparents. What do you say? You're still a child. Children should just play and have fun. But Grandpa, I want to assist you. Growing vegetables is something that interests me as well. My grandparents finally gave in and let me to assist after I persisted in asking. They taught me everything there was to know about growing veggies, and they appeared excited every day. They were particularly delighted because I genuinely cared about vegetables, not because I was assisting. They would put me on the tractor and show me the ropes while grinning. You eat everything with such joy, even though many children don't even enjoy veggies. You're even considering cultivating them. We're so fortunate to have such a fantastic grandchild. The faces of my grandparents, who worked in the fields under the clear sky every day, were well tanned and deeply lined. Seeing the two of them, their faces crinkled with laughter as they patted my head, warmed my heart deeply. I knew how many years they'd spent under the sun and rain, taking care of me, making sure I always had warm meals and a soft bed. But even as they looked after me, I knew they cried in front of my mother's portrait after I had gone to bed. I can still remember that scene vividly. One night, I woke up to go to the bathroom and saw light coming from the room with the family altar. Peeking through the sliding door, I wondered what was happening there. I saw my grandmother, who was always so cheerful during the day, breaking down in front of my mother's photo. My grandfather sat beside her, supporting her frail frame, and gently said over and over, "At the very least, let's raise him well in her place." That was the first time I realized my grandparents too were enveloped in deep sorrow. Since then, I've tried my best to brighten their spirits, hoping to bring them some of the light my mother once did. Helping with the farm was one part of my plan, and I also made an effort to keep the house filled with laughter, saying funny things every day to make my grandparents smile. Whether because of this or not, the number of nights I heard crying from the altar room gradually decreased, and we slowly settled into a peaceful daily life together. By the time I was in high school, my grandparents began to grow frail and could no longer manage the farm on the same scale as before. So we rented out some of the farmland, drastically reducing our yield. Around then, the only crops my grandparents grew were cabbage, which required a lot of land but minimal effort, and cherry tomatoes, which could be grown abundantly on a small plot. This much we can handle on our own, so don't worry about us. Just leave this rural place and find a job that suits you. No need to be tied to farming. But after I graduate, I was thinking I'd take over the farm, intent on supporting my grandparents. I tried to convince them with all my might. Yet both of them shook their heads, encouraging me instead to go to college in the city and find a job outside of farming. I heard from your teacher, Mr. Manning, that you're bright enough for anything. Hard times are coming for farming, with cheap vegetables being imported from overseas. That's why I want to help with the farm, to make things easier for you both. Surprisingly, it was my grandmother who reacted sternly to my words. What kind of grandparents would want to ease their burden at the expense of their grandson's future? Our happiest when you have a life filled with happiness. I was touched by her feelings, but I still couldn't bring myself to leave. I was, of course, worried about my grandparents, but part of me was also apprehensive about living on my own. Sensing my unease, my grandfather softened his expression. Step away from farming for a while and find what you truly want to do. Study hard in the city, and if you still want to come back to farming, return here. Then you can bring us the new agricultural practices of your generation. Yeah, okay. In the end, I began studying for exams and was accepted to a prestigious university in the prefecture. I enrolled in the engineering department to study computer software. Though I'd been immersed in farming all my life, I was captivated by computers when I first used one at a friend's house in high school. So when they urged me to explore something other than farming, computers were the first thing that came to mind. After graduating, I got a job as a programmer at a large company in the city. I worked tirelessly from dawn till dusk, immersing myself in the latest, then rare computer technology and configurations. It was a fulfilling job and a new lifestyle. As I threw myself into the endless flood of information, 10 years flew by in a flash. I made it back home to my grandparents' place for New Year's and summer, but gradually, work became an excuse to visit less often. Seeing them shrink a little each year, I'd remind them to take care of their health, but I didn't truly understand the reality. It took another phone call for me to recognize my own foolishness. The shrill ring in the early morning brought back memories of that call I received as a child when I was told of my mother's death. With shaking fingers and a cold sweat on my brow, I answered the phone to hear my grandmother's tearful voice. Your grandfather. He collapsed. Panicked, I rushed back home and went to the hospital my grandmother told me about. Apparently, my grandfather had pushed himself too hard working in the rain and had been taken in just short of pneumonia. They assured me his life wasn't in danger, but seeing him lying under those crisp, white hospital sheets, his body thin like a withered branch, filled me with grief. Grandpa, how did it come to this? I'm sorry to have called so early in the morning, my grandmother said, her voice trembling. I was just so shocked, and I couldn't think straight. Sitting by his bed, my grandmother kept apologizing, her back hunched with age. When did they become so frail? All this time, I'd been living far away, out of touch with my hometown. Stunned, I resolved to move back home that very day. My grandparents tried to talk me out of it once again, but I insisted. This is my life. Let me make my own choices. If I don't come back now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I couldn't just abandon my company, so I informed them of my decision to resign and began the process of handing over my work. My boss, Alex, who had looked out for me since I joined, tried to persuade me to stay. But when he saw how determined I was, he gave me a knowing smile. We're really going to miss your innovative ideas here. They've been a great motivator for everyone. If you ever need anything, just give me a call. I thought he was giving me too much credit, but I was genuinely touched that he would miss me. And so, I left my corporate life behind and returned to my hometown. In the end, my grandparents were delighted, and they enjoyed our life together after so many years. Once back in the fields, I could see how much the farm had shrunk since I was in high school. We had rented out most of the unused land, but there were still large sections left untouched, with wild grass growing thickly. Seeing the ample space available, my eyes lit up. The truth was, I'd been nurturing a plan in my mind ever since my years working in the city. "Grandpa, would it be all right if I grew something I'm passionate about here?" "Do whatever you want. I plan to leave the whole farm in your hands one day, so go ahead and try things out as you like." With that, I immediately started cultivating something new: herbs. It was an unusual choice in our area, where no one paid much attention to them. Nowadays, you can find herbs at any grocery store, but back then, they were still considered a novel ingredient. I believed herbs had potential, not only for cooking, but for their fragrance and appeal as a sensory experience. Luckily, there was equipment my grandfather had used to grow cherry tomatoes in a greenhouse, so I used that to cultivate the seedlings. I began producing herbs in bulk for restaurants, while also persuading local supermarkets to create a small display for my products. Fortunately, as herbs were starting to trend, my herb farm took off better than I had expected. After a few years, my herb sales outpaced my grandparents' vegetable sales. They had grown quite old by then, and this seemed like a good opportunity for them to hand over the business entirely to me. My herb garden became well known locally, and my grandparents would beam with pride whenever neighbors praised me as such a wonderful grandson. Soon, people started requesting herbs for their home gardens, and others suggested selling bouquets made from the flowers instead of just the leaves. My herb garden turned into a neighborhood favorite. The vegetables we grew filled people's bellies, but the herbs you grow fill their hearts, my grandmother said one day, leaving me a bit flustered. Just when I thought I'd finally made my grandparents proud, they both passed away within a short time of each other. "We're so happy that you've grown into such an admirable person. It was a blessing to have a grandson who brings smiles to people's faces," they had told me. Left alone, I felt a deep sadness, but I also held their parting words close to my heart. I knew that the life I had now was thanks to inheriting my grandparents' farming legacy. From that point on, I resolved to grow the farm further and make it my life's mission. With that in mind, I decided to expand the business and sought a loan from the bank. "Thank you for your time today," I said as I entered the local bank. The man handling my loan was named Kevin, and he greeted me with a friendly smile. Since I was planning to expand my grandparents' farm, I needed a significant amount of funding, so I had come to the bank hoping for a loan. "No need to be so tense. Relax," Kevin said. "Thank you. A friend recommended you, and I feel reassured seeing such a kind face," I replied, letting my genuine thoughts slip. Kevin chuckled as our conversation shifted to small talk. However, he made no effort to ask about my business plan. If this continued, I'd just be wasting time. Though I felt it might seem abrupt, I decided to steer the conversation back to business and took out my proposal. "Here's my business plan. If I could start by explaining." "No need. I don't see anything worth discussing." Kevin cut me off with a dismissive laugh. Feeling uneasy and wondering what was going on, I nervously asked, "Do you mean today is just an introductory meeting?" "No. I'm telling you we're not lending you money, so there's no need for pointless discussion, right?" With that, Kevin shot me an unpleasant look. Frankly, turning up to discuss a serious loan dressed in mud-stained work clothes doesn't convey any commitment. Also, that's your pickup truck in the parking lot, isn't it? Kevin pointed to the parking lot visible from the window. Sure enough, the light truck I had rushed to the bank in was parked there. "I can't offer a loan to someone who drives that kind of vehicle." "I apologize for my attire," I explained. "I had an urgent job come up, so I came directly from the farm." I had planned to wear a suit for the meeting. However, just an hour before our appointment, a client contacted me wanting a tour of my herb farm. I'd been busy showing them around right up until it was time to head to the bank. So, rather than being late, I decided to come in my work clothes and truck. All of this effort was for one purpose: to have my business plan reviewed and secure funding from the bank. Determined to be heard, I took the proposal out once more and placed it in front of Kevin. If you just look at the details, you'd understand. I've spent years working on this plan. Please at least give it a glance. Enough already. You're too persistent. To my shock, Kevin roughly brushed my arm aside. Furthermore, he snatched the plan from my hands, tore it to shreds, and tossed it into the trash. I was stunned, left staring in disbelief at the scattered remains of my hard work. Kevin sneered in satisfaction and said, "Use some common sense. Banks only lend to clients with a clear ability to repay. We're not in the business of lending to low-level farmers." It was clear that reasoning with this man was useless. With a sigh in my heart, I told him what I'd been thinking. "All right then, I'll stop renting out my land to you." Kevin was dumbfounded for a moment, then burst into laughter. "Rent out land? What are you talking about? We're not in need of land from a poor farmer like you. You'd make a better comedian than a farmer." Laughing heartily, Kevin opened the door wide and said, "Thank you for your time today. This way to the exit." Feeling dazed and baffled, I returned to the parking lot. In fact, it was a mutual contact who had arranged this loan discussion. An old acquaintance who knew my business plan had vouched for me and said he had connections at the bank, insisting I should present my proposal. Trusting his recommendation, I came to this meeting, but it seemed Kevin had no idea I'd been introduced. Sitting back in my truck, I sighed deeply and decided to call my acquaintance. After just a few rings, he picked up. "That was quick. So, did you get the full loan?" The voice on the other end was that of my former boss, Alex. He had moved up to the role of executive director with an impressive network of connections. It was Alex who had encouraged me to try securing a loan through this local bank, saying he put in a good word. Unable to hide my confusion, I explained everything that had just happened. "I'm afraid I was turned down. I didn't even get to discuss the loan." "What did you say?" Even over the phone, I could hear the weight in Alex's voice. After I recounted the entire incident with Kevin from start to finish, Alex let out a deep sigh. "It seems there was a misunderstanding at the bank. Please wait there. I'll sort this out right now." Since this was Alex, someone who had always been there for me, I couldn't refuse his request. Though I wanted to get back to my herb farm, I decided to wait a bit longer out of respect for him. Then, just 10 minutes later, an elderly man came rushing out of the bank, looking flustered. "Nathan, please wait. I beg you to give us another chance to discuss this." The man, pale and breathless, introduced himself as Watson, the bank's president. Bowing deeply, he said, "I received a call from Alex earlier and finally learned the situation. This is entirely due to my lack of oversight, and I have no words to express my apology. Please raise your head. It sounds like you're saying the loan is out of reach anyway." In response to my answer, Mr. Watson shook his head vigorously from side to side. At that moment, Kevin appeared, following closely behind him. "Mr. Watson, is everything all right? You left so suddenly I was worried." "All right? How could it be? Do you have any idea who this man is?" Mr. Watson snapped at Kevin, his eyes blazing with anger. But Kevin, with a misplaced grin, began to say something unbelievable. "So, still loitering around? I see. Figured you'd stick around just to cause a scene in the parking lot." Kevin cast a scornful look my way, then turned to Mr. Watson with a forced smile. "I'll escort this lowlife out immediately. I wouldn't want him to cause you any trouble, so please go back inside." "Kevin, you really didn't listen to a word, did you? This man is no lowlife, and changing your attitude based on a client's appearance is utterly unacceptable." As Mr. Watson's anger grew, Kevin stood there wide-eyed and gaping in shock. As soon as Kevin realized that Mr. Watson's anger was directed at him, his composure began to crumble. "But what's the big deal about this, farmer? I don't understand why you're so upset, Mr. Watson. This man, Nathan, came to us as a referral from Alex, the executive of Wells Corporation, one of our bank's most important clients. Hearing this, Kevin's face turned pale, and he began to tremble. Alex, a member of the family that owned my previous company, was poised to become the next president, and Wells Corporation had a long-standing relationship with this bank. That was why Alex went out of his way to introduce me. I informed you, Kevin, that Nathan would be coming in today to discuss a loan. So why on earth did you deny his application without even reviewing it? Well, He seemed to finally grasp the seriousness of the situation. Kevin turned pale, starting to shake uncontrollably. Watching him look back and forth between me and Mr. Watson with a frightened expression, I thought he might simply apologize. Sure, he had treated me poorly earlier, but after all, I was a potential loan client introduced by Alex. I wanted to handle this as smoothly as possible. However, Kevin didn't seem to feel the same way. His pride seemed to get in the way, and he glared at me resentfully, muttering complaints under his breath. I apologize for the disrespect, but excuse me for saying this. This man arrived in a pickup truck. Kevin's response left me, and even Mr. Watson, stunned in disbelief. Even after all that had been said, he still had the audacity to argue further. Yet, seeing our shocked silence, Kevin seemed to think he'd made his point. He regained a bit of his color, and, with great effort, began explaining his view, spitting out his words with enthusiasm. No matter who recommends who, if they lack the ability to repay, a bank can't grant a loan. That's what I concluded. Kevin pointed at my muddy work clothes and then at the pickup truck outside, continuing with pride. Even with a big client backing him, if he's just a poor farmer, we can't lend to him. In fact, lending just because he's a client's friend would actually mean changing our standards based on the person. So that's how you evaluated him? Mr. Watson's quiet voice interrupted Kevin's rant. The sudden calmness in Mr. Watson's tone took Kevin by surprise, leaving him speechless. But as bankers, it's our job to thoroughly understand our clients' backgrounds. I thought I taught you that, Kevin. That's exactly what I did. I judged Nathan based on his clothes and his vehicle. Kevin's persistence finally snapped Mr. Watson's patience. Don't be ridiculous. Anyone working at this bank should know who this man is. Nathan is the owner of a vast amount of land, including the very land on which our bank sits. Land? You mean he was serious about that? Kevin's jaw dropped, and he stared at me, visibly shaken, as if he might collapse from the shock. Watching his ridiculous reaction, I struggled to hold back laughter. When my grandfather scaled back his farming operations, a large amount of vacant land opened up. Not wanting to let the land go to waste, he rented it out to various parties, with the bank becoming his biggest tenant. This entire area, from the main road to the parking lot, was land my grandfather had leased to the bank. I had inherited that property and continued the lease. Although I'd sold much of the other land to cover inheritance taxes, I still owned the area around the bank. That was precisely why Mr. Watson was scolding Kevin with such fury. Sure, Alex's referral was significant. But more than that, this bank has been indebted to his family's land for generations. And you had the nerve to speak so disrespectfully to Nathan. I didn't know. If I had been informed, I would never have said anything about his truck. Scrambling for an excuse, Kevin shifted the blame to me, as if it were my fault for not telling him sooner. Utterly exasperated, I finally spoke up. I included all of that information in my business plan. Yet it was Kevin who tore it up without even looking at it. You tore up a client's documents. Apparently, he hadn't heard that part, and Mr. Watson's anger flared even more. Facing Mr. Watson, who looked furious enough to have steam coming from his head, Kevin turned pale, shrinking in on himself, barely able to breathe. I would never do such a thing. Nathan must be mistaken. There's no proof that I did that. There is proof. The person who called out to us was a young bank clerk. In his hand was the trash can where Kevin had thrown the documents earlier. Inside the trash can, as expected, lay the torn remains of my business proposal. I was surprised that the meeting ended so quickly, so I thought I'd start tidying up the room. That's when I found these important documents discarded, so I brought them here. Mind your own business. In a sudden fit of anger, Kevin lunged toward the young clerk. But just in time, Mr. Watson grabbed Kevin's arm, firmly restraining him. That's enough. Stop this disgraceful behavior, Kevin. I'll decide on the consequences later. For now, go home and await further instructions. Mr. Watson, please believe me. I was only doing my job, diligently working to maximize the bank's profits. Kevin's desperate attempts at an excuse only highlighted his prejudice and misguided efforts. Other staff and security personnel had gathered and began to escort Kevin out of the building. Yet, he managed to shoot me a resentful glare. No matter how much land you inherited or how many connections you have, you're nothing special. Loan or no loan, your farm will fail, and that's a fact. There's no need to worry. My herb farm is growing its revenue steadily. When I answered calmly, Kevin gasped sharply, his voice catching as he tried to respond. Herb farm. Nathan, you mean the one recognized as a regional revitalization model, backed by the local government, and highly sought after by city restaurants and local supermarkets. Oh, you knew? Then you should have looked at my business proposal. If he'd simply read the documents instead of making snap judgments, he would have seen who I really was. I hadn't applied for the loan out of financial desperation. In fact, it was quite the opposite. I was planning an expansion to establish a new high-altitude farm in a neighboring county to support seasonal and variety growth. As Kevin had unwittingly mentioned, my current herb farm was thriving. With this success, I intended to diversify my offerings and spread out production across the year. Given the scope of my plans, I could easily have approached a large urban bank. But my loyalty to the local bank, which had served my grandparents, led me to prioritize them, especially with Alex's recommendation. However, if the loan officer had this much animosity toward me, there was nothing more to be done. I'll consider other banks that may be more suitable, I said, turning to leave. No, please wait, Nathan. Mr. Watson, desperate to salvage the situation, ignored Kevin, who now stood stunned, and pleaded with me. Although Watson wasn't directly responsible for the conflict, the training of his staff was ultimately his duty. Kevin had judged me solely by my appearance, dismissing me as poor and unworthy despite my family's connection to the bank and Alex's recommendation. I could no longer trust a bank that employed people like him. Without paying any attention to Mr. Watson, I got into the truck and quietly pressed down on the accelerator. As I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw Kevin's expression, a mixture of anger and despair, as he crumpled to the ground. Before long, he disappeared from sight. In the end, the local bank ultimately went under. Apparently, as I left, a group of high school girls had overheard my parting words. Hey, did you hear that? I think this bank might be in trouble. Really? Does that mean it might go under? We should take out our savings right away. Although it was simply a misunderstanding, the phrase, "the bank is in trouble," spread rapidly through friends, family, and workplace gossip. The rumor took on a life of its own. As a result, countless people who had no idea where the rumors originated started to believe the bank was in financial trouble, and they all rushed to the bank's counter to withdraw their savings. Because of this, withdrawals surged. Within just a few days, approximately $2 billion was withdrawn, causing the bank, originally with no issues, to go under. Most of the bank staff, including Watson, managed to find new jobs. But no one was willing to hire Kevin. Rumors spread that Kevin's behavior had led to the bank's downfall, earning him the nickname Kevin the Bank Breaker. Eventually, Kevin disappeared from town altogether. Some say he was sued for damages for blocking my business deal, or that he borrowed from predatory lenders to make ends meet. But one thing is certain, I'll never see Kevin's face again. As for me, I secured funding from another bank shortly after. I am now expanding a new herb farm in the highlands of the neighboring county. My business continues to thrive, and the farm's serene green setting has become popular with visitors seeking a peaceful retreat. We even opened a restaurant on-site, serving fresh herbs and vegetables harvested from our fields. Nowadays, people visit not just for the herbs, but to enjoy our dishes. We offer an array of products like herb bouquets, cookies, cakes, and herbal teas. Families come with their kids on weekends, and the farm is always alive with greenery and smiles. Watching this scene, I speak to my grandparents in my heart. Grandpa, you always loved seeing me bring smiles to others. I'll keep working hard to be a grandson you can be proud of. Please keep watching over me. As I looked up at the clear blue sky, a gentle breeze swept through, softly rustling the herbs as if responding to me. With effect from today, I am resigning your position with the branch manager's approval. I appreciate all of your hard work thus far. I had stepped away from the busy front desk operations to take on more subdued back office duties as I approached retirement. Under the guise of reform, the new, youthful, and energetic branch manager started getting rid of anything and everyone that was thought to be superfluous or in a way, including jobs and people. I objected. I don't understand why I'm being fired. You're in the way, the branch manager said in a frustrated tone. It irritates me to see you just sitting at your desk, doing simple things that anyone could do, and acting like you're all important. The management boldly proclaimed such ludicrous logic. So they were merely low-level jobs that anyone could complete at their own pace. I suppose there was nothing to be done about it if it was a formal order. I chose to dutifully comply with the manager's instruction. I got a lot of calls from the bank a week later. Robert is my name. As a bank employee, I frequently work in the background. I'm 51 years old now. I currently primarily manage minor administrative duties after taking a break from the hectic front desk operations. I also occasionally help loyal customers. I get nostalgic for my earlier years when I watch the youthful staff members working hard at the front desk. I work slowly on small projects, have no chance of getting promoted, and am simply waiting to retire. However, I've come to enjoy my current position. It is a relaxed style of work that is appropriate for a worker who is getting close to retirement. Actually, the majority of our branch's workers my age begin to progressively reduce their workload. Whether for familial considerations, early retirement fun, or other reasons, many people take early retirement to enjoy their later years. Taking care of grandchildren and spending time with family seem like the ideal moment for a change in lifestyle. A branch manager just retired before reaching retirement age. He desired to care for his family in his native country. He will be replaced today by a new branch manager. Hello everyone. From today, I will be serving as the new branch manager. Mark is my name. I'm excited to collaborate with each of you. During the morning meeting, Mark, the new branch manager, enthusiastically welcomed the employees. Wearing a sharp suit and a watch that looked costly, he appeared to be around 10 years younger than me. Determination was blazing in his eyes. His serious manner gave me the impression that it would be difficult to follow him. Oa, you're there. Could you immediately take me on a tour of the branch? Me? Yes, I will give you a tour. Thank you. Everyone else, please start your usual tasks. Don't mind me, just carry on as normal. Mark approached Susan, a young female employee, and started touring the branch. The rest of us, including myself, got on with our usual tasks. Excuse me. What task are you working on? Suddenly, a loud voice from above startled me. Whoa, you scared me. I accidentally blurted out. Looking up, I saw Mark, arms crossed and looking somewhat disgruntled. Susan glanced over in a puzzled manner. What's this? Mark asked, looking at my work. I honestly replied, "I'm checking and entering application forms." Mark sighed heavily. "Honestly, I've never seen such a laid-back workplace before," he complained with a look of utter exasperation. "By laid back, you mean?" "Exactly as it sounds. At the branch I'd worked at before, no employee would spend time on such tasks. I'm surprised to find employees specialized in back-office work here. Checking and entering documents may not be a big job, but it's necessary. In tasks involving large amounts of money, even small mistakes aren't tolerated. I think someone has to do it." I didn't know how it was at his previous branch, but was there really no one doing back-office work? I almost retorted that, but it felt too bothersome, so I just responded nonchalantly, "Is that so?" and forced a smile. Susan, who was anxiously watching, seemed pitiful. I thought if I let it slide, Mark would just leave. But for some reason, he stayed and seemed to be contemplating. Then, with a decisive nod, as if having made up his mind, Mark started speaking to no one in particular. Decided, "Starting tomorrow, this branch will undergo a reform." The next day, true to his word, Mark began implementing reforms at the branch. First, he replaced almost all the equipment in the office with new ones. I wondered where the budget for that came from. Then, he increased the workload of the younger and mid-level employees, especially at the front desk. The clerical tasks that used to be sent to the back office were now less frequently assigned to me. Thanks to this, the paid employees, who were already busy, seemed even busier than before. Once I achieve the reform of this branch, its sales will increase even more. This will benefit all the employees, and I'll climb higher too. Mark was overheard saying this excitedly to the younger employees. In reality, since his arrival, the young employees' sales performance had improved slightly. Maybe it was the result of Mark's Spartan-style leadership. As for me, watching Mark and the young employees, I thought to myself, being young is incredible. It felt as if it didn't concern me. So, I never imagined that this reform would turn against me one day. Mark called me to his office. I was surprised as he hadn't spoken to me since his first day. "Do you need something?" "Yeah, I'll keep it short since I'm busy," he said, thrusting a piece of paper at me. With the authority of a branch manager, he stated, "I'm terminating your employment effective today. Thank you for your hard work until now." "Yes," I responded, tilting my head reflexively in confusion. Mark's loud voice meant that other nearby employees could hear my sudden termination notice. The surroundings began to buzz with whispers. I thought I had misheard, but the document clearly stated it was a termination notice. "You'll be compensated for your services accordingly. We'll handle the difficult procedures, so please pack your belongings and leave." Mark spoke rapidly, then turned away to return to his work. I was utterly confused, so I confronted him. "Wait a minute. I don't understand why I'm being fired. Have I done something detrimental to this branch?" Despite my stern questioning, Mark didn't look at me and said, "We'll properly offer you a retirement package." That's not what I'm talking about. I'm asking if I violated any employment rules or made any major mistakes. This is wrongful termination. Mark sighed wearily and finally turned to face me. "You're violating your duty of dedication to your job. Bank officers and employees must be aware of their public mission, conduct their duties with integrity, and strive for smooth processing. That's in the regulations." "How am I violating that? Please be specific." "Ah, this is tiresome. You're not keeping up with the new equipment and systems, still using the old ones, causing delays in work. Don't you see?" Mark ranted impatiently. Have I ever delayed any work deadlines? I don't think I've caused any delays in work. It's wasteful how young employees have to teach you to use the new equipment or wait for your verification on everything. It's hindering smooth operations. That's an outrageous accusation, I said, anger seeping into my voice. Mark clicked his tongue and stepped closer, intimidatingly looking down at me. "You're in the way." "You are." Mark said, almost spitting the words out. While other employees were bustling around, he continued, "You're just lounging at your desk doing menial work that anyone could do. Sitting back after finishing such trivial tasks, it's irritating to watch." Mark, not even trying to hide his malice anymore, was unreservedly harsh in his words despite speaking to someone older than himself. "I'm neither lounging nor sitting back arrogantly. So basically, you want to fire me not because I'm a detriment to the branch, but simply because you're annoyed with me." I found myself responding calmly even in the face of Mark's irrational logic. "Think whatever you want. Layoffs for staff restructuring aren't uncommon. If you're gone, we can hire more competent younger employees at the right time." Mark responded with a snort. "Excuse me, but I think a dismissal without a rational reason counts as an abuse of managerial power. Besides, the back office work, which was Robert's responsibility, was a task assigned by the previous branch manager and was supposed to continue this fiscal year." Susan, who had been anxiously observing our argument, interjected timidly. Following her, other employees started murmuring in agreement, whispering, "That's right. It's an abuse of power." Then from this very moment, back office work is abolished. Mark shouted out loud, not caring who was watching. Thankfully, it was after business hours, and no customers were around. "I'm the branch manager now. The previous one might have tolerated it, but I don't need incompetence in my branch. If anyone else objects, you're fired too. There are plenty of replacements." The other employees quickly averted their eyes, but only Susan kept looking at Mark, albeit shrinking in fear. If this goes on, Susan will be his next target. Realizing this, I took a deep breath and, with a calm smile, said, "Understood. If the task is being abolished, I accept the dismissal." Everyone, including the surrounding employees and Mark, was momentarily stunned by my sudden acceptance of the order. However, I added, "Let me give you one piece of advice. Everything you've said in our entire conversation has been heard by other employees. Everything. So, please make sure you have no regrets." "Ah, regrets. What are you talking about? It's good that you understand. I'm really relieved that you're taking it so well." That was the end of our conversation. I packed my things that day and completed the minimal handover. It was extremely disappointing to leave the bank I had worked at for over 20 years in such a manner. But as I was leaving, the employees I had worked with for years expressed their sadness at my departure. Some even shed tears. Despite their pleas for me to reconsider, I replied, "I appreciate your sentiments," and went home. A week passed with no job to go to and no need to wake up early. My sleep schedule was irregular. One day, I woke up around 10:00 a.m. Picking up my phone, I noticed dozens of missed call notifications, all from the bank I had been dismissed from a week ago. What's this about? I wondered. But before I could ponder further, the phone rang again. Reluctantly, I answered. Immediately, a familiar shouting voice came through. "What in the world is going on?" So loud. "Is that you, manager? What's this all about?" "What do you mean?" "What? What have you done? Tell me the truth." "I have no idea what you're talking about. Start from the beginning." As I asked for an explanation, Mark began telling me what had happened over the past week. A few days after I left, major clients started canceling their accounts. The internal back office operations were on the brink of collapse, barely functioning. Throughout his explanation, Mark sounded panicked. But honestly, I couldn't care less. "That's why I warned you," I muttered, astounded. Back when I was a newbie at the bank's counter, lacking confidence in my abilities, I spared no effort to improve my communication and interpersonal skills. As a result, I could handle even the most difficult customers or explain complex issues without trouble. The customers I occasionally served in my 50s were all longtime clients who relied on me. They trusted me more than any other employee for my clear and concise explanations. Among them were many of Mark's so-called major clients. Wealthy people are cautious with their money. They don't entrust their assets to a bank with untrustworthy people. That's why I always prioritize trust with clients. In just 1 week, Mark managed to ruin the trust I built over 20 years. I was beyond anger or sadness. I was just dumbfounded. I don't know why all the major clients left at once, but what do you mean by back office work on the brink of collapse? Isn't it easy and leisurely work that anyone can do? I retorted with a rare touch of sarcasm, mirroring the words Mark had previously used on me. I knew all too well that back office work wasn't as easy as it was made out to be. I was determined to let him know. As I approached retirement, turning 50, I had moved away from front desk operations to handle nearly all the processing tasks that other employees couldn't manage. Each task, though simple on its own, amounted to a tremendous volume of work, taking as much time and effort as front desk duties. Spending all day with numbers and documents is more tiring than one might think, and many give up after a few days. Living alone with no particular hobbies, finding joy solely in work, and constantly learning new things, perhaps I was an exception. Regardless, I've always believed there's no such thing as an idle task in a bank. How pretentious! You must have bad-mouthed our branch to your clients out of spite. Absolutely not. As a professional, I would never say anything that could damage the branch's reputation for personal reasons. I merely sent thank-you letters to the clients who had relied on me for years. I had been in the process of handing over my clients to lower employees like Susan. When clients visited the bank, I would sometimes appear to assure them, "Please trust them with your business after my retirement." When Mark ordered my dismissal, I wrote personalized farewell letters to each client, explaining the reason for my departure. I was dismissed for a rational reason, wasn't I? For neglecting my duty of dedication to work? I simply informed the clients of this and apologized. What? So that's why the clients are all saying they need to reconsider their association with us? You should have interfered. The content of my apology for my own negligence doesn't violate any duty of confidentiality or reputation maintenance. Informing them of my retirement and my successors seems only natural. It may sound inappropriate, but I was really pleased that many clients were angered by the unfair treatment I had received. Perhaps they thought someone like me could never violate my duty of dedication to work. It felt like validation for my earnest efforts. Just come back immediately. You have to take responsibility for this mess. What are you talking about? You dismissed me a week ago. I'm no longer an employee there. Instead of wasting time on this pointless conversation, why don't you get back to your work? That dismissal notice was fake. You're still an employee here. Consider the past week as paid leave and return to work immediately. Mark, in his arrogance, was now confessing to document forgery. I was almost speechless at his shameless and hysterical behavior. You've been quite loud. Isn't it business hours? Aren't you alarming the customers? As a bank employee, shouldn't you refrain from such behavior? I tried to remain as calm as possible. After a moment of silence, Mark's voice softened. Please, just come to the bank. I'm begging you. Later, I visited the bank as requested. In the manager's office, Mark was joined by senior bank executives. Mark looked haggard, a shadow of his former self. He was likely reprimanded by the higher-ups. First, I received apologies from all the senior executives present. Unanimously, they said, "We want you to come back." I appreciate your trust, but I can't work under a manager who casually engages in wrongful dismissal and document forgery. Understood. So, if the branch manager changes, would that resolve the issue? Just as I was about to agree, Mark rushed over to me and deeply apologized. Robert, please. I didn't realize you handled so many major clients. I apologize for my rude behavior. Please don't let me be fired. Despite his change in attitude, Mark's volume and intensity remained high. Manager, Please, a bit quieter. Your voice can be heard from the client area." As the office door opened, Susan entered, accompanied by one of my longtime major clients, Wilson from Wilson Real Estate. "Robert San always speaks highly of you." I apologized for the disturbance. He greeted me with a polite nod. He was my longest-serving client and also the father of the bank employee, Susan. "I've heard about the situation from Susan. I'm sorry for what you've been through. This prompted me to rethink where I keep my assets. I'm here to handle some procedures with Susan." It seemed Wilson was here to close his accounts. It was regrettable to lose such a long-standing client, but it was understandable. However, I overheard that if the manager changes, you might return. If that's true, I'd be confident in entrusting my assets to you again. Whether Wilson's words influenced the decision isn't clear, but ultimately, Mark was promptly dismissed. He was confronted with a genuine dismissal notice, not a forged one. As far as I was concerned, his future was none of my business. With his banking experience, I thought he wouldn't struggle to find another job. But it turned out not to be so easy. Wilson, a prominent client, had accounts at various banks around the area. Under the guise of casual conversation, he spread the word about Mark's actions. Mark became blacklisted in the banking community, being rejected for employment everywhere he went. "A client isn't bound by charity," Susan casually remarked, echoing her father's words, which I found a bit intimidating. I heard through the grapevine that Mark is now getting by with part-time jobs. I sent greeting cards to my clients, explaining my return to the bank. Even those who had closed their accounts upon my dismissal quickly reopened them when they heard of my comeback. This experience taught me the importance of transitioning responsibilities to others. I'm now actively mentoring the younger employees. They are all eager to learn and take responsibility. It's incredibly fulfilling to still be needed and able to contribute at over 50. With the new goal of nurturing the next generation of bankers, I'm experiencing exciting days, youthful enthusiasm notwithstanding.